Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 18th work session of the Town Board of the Town of Ossining. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have to do roll call, right? This is a work session. Okay, so we have a few interesting items on our agenda for tonight, but first, a few announcements. We are coming off another great weekend here in Ossining. Even though we started out a bit soggy, KJ dinner was rained out Friday night, but was very accommodating and rocked the Lewis Engle Park stage on Saturday night to a big crowd. And just down the street, hundreds of folks gathered for a sold-out Lobster Fest to support the Chamber of Commerce and the Sing Sing Museum. I was also glad to attend the celebration of two 50-year members of the Ossining Fire Department, Mr. David C. and Mr. James Raguso Sr., where I got to thank the gentlemen for their service and bring them proclamations from the town board. You will be interested to know that today is David C. Day in the town of Ossining, and James Raguso Day is tomorrow. I also got to attend Bliss Sing at the Camp Woods grounds, which ended the weekend on a sincerely cheerful and optimistic note. Thanks to everyone who organized these and other events for all they do to create such a strong community here in Ossining. We are lucky to have them all. We are also excited to announce that the new picnic sites at Engle will be open by the last weekend in July. We do have one event scheduled for this weekend, and they will be able to use the picnic site, but they will be fully operational for everybody by the following weekend. We are just waiting for the grass to grow in a little bit so that we can put down the picnic tables and the signage. The spaces will be open to the public, but will require a permit for groups of 20 or more, not but and. They will require a permit for groups of 20 or more. That doesn't mean you can't get a permit for smaller groups. If you want to reserve the site, you can. You just call the Recreation Department at 941-3189. We should also have the new temporary site for the basketball court at Ryder sealed by this weekend. Of course, we are happy to announce the next performer in our Friday night waterfront concert series, and that is the Uncle Brothers with Tommy Gardner. They have a great family-friendly lineup and original ballads, so come on down with your picnic or plan to purchase food from one of the food vendors. Bring some chairs or a blanket and prepare for a wonderful evening on the beautiful Ossining waterfront this Friday. We have a couple events this week that you won't want to miss. If you're watching this live, don't forget that tomorrow, Wednesday, July 19th, Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff will be hosting a senior forum at Cortland Town Hall between 9 a.m. and noon. Breakfast will be provided free of charge, along with information about a variety of topics pertinent to seniors. I hope you all consider attending this informative and free event. On Thursday, July 20th at 11 a.m., IFCA will be holding a groundbreaking celebration at 19 Hamilton Avenue. The properties at 19 Hamilton and 49-51 State Street will be renovated with $296,000 in CDBG funding and will provide workforce housing for 10 families. So come join the celebration on Thursday morning. On Thursday evening, the Ossining Documentary and Discussion Series will be hosting 13th, which will examine how our history since the 13th Amendment continues to impact Black Americans. As always, the screening begins at 6:30 p.m. and will be followed by a panel of guest speakers. I urge you not to miss this important conversation. Beginning on Friday evening, July 21st, Westchester Collaborative Theater, also known as WCT, will present July One Acts, a series of 4 one-act performances. You can buy your tickets for all performances, Friday the 21st at 8, Saturday the 22nd at 2, and 8, and Sunday the 23rd at 3 by visiting wctheater.org. This Sunday, July 23rd, Shannemuck Yacht Club will host Ladies Kayak Day beginning at 10 a.m. A suggested donation of $10 per person will go to benefit the SPCA. Don't miss this annual favorite and enjoy a morning paddling on the Hudson. Follow that up with Mind, Body, Spirit Ossining and Susu of Studio 95 Zumba on the beach at Engle Park at 3 p.m. On Friday, July 28th, the Rotary Club of Ossining will be installing their new officers at the GE Management Training Center in Ossining. The event begins at 6 p.m. and all reservations must be made in advance. RSVP to gaweeks@att.net. There's still time to register for the town's foreclosure auction, which will take place in this very room next Tuesday, July 25th at 1 p.m. There are 2 properties that we are going to auction, and you can learn more by visiting www.townofaustining.com. I also want to share that this morning I attended a press conference in White Plains where County Executive Rob Astorino announced that the county has been found to be in compliance with the HUD housing settlement after almost 6 years of discussion and litigation. As one of the affected communities, I'm hopeful that this decision means that the funds being held up due to the conflict will become available to the town of Ossining in the near future. And I do believe that those are CDBG funds, which we heard earlier the village has had access to and are able to be used for improvements to our housing stock and our affordable housing stock in Ossining. Finally, I want to share that we have gotten some calls asking about the letter that the town board voted to send to the Newcastle Planning Board in reference to the Sunshine Children's Home, which abuts our property at Cedar Lane Park. The letter was submitted on July 10th and to the Newcastle Planning Board and can be found on the town's website in my last supervisor's update or under publications and supervisor. For those who are unfamiliar, the town has had a long-standing agreement with the operators of Sunshine Home that pertains to their sewer pump station, which the town maintains. With the proposed increase from 54 to 122 beds at the facility, our board has concerns over how this would impact the flow to the sewer pump station, coupled with concerns about the amount of water to be used from Sunshine's wells and about the potential traffic both during and after construction in Cedar Lane Park. I want to thank all of the residents who brought these issues to our attention, and we will continue to keep a close eye on this issue. All right, and now we are up to our work session items. So for our first presentation this evening, first let me just, ask if there's anybody.
St. Augustine's?
St. Augustine's, sorry about that. St. Augustine's Italian Festival starts July 18th and goes through July 23rd, I believe. And July 18th is today. That's today. So come on down to St. Augustine's. They have great food, lots of games and rides, and fireworks, I believe, are tomorrow, right, Wednesday. So come on down. Anything else that I missed? Missed? Anything? All right. In that case, yes, let's get to our work session. So first, our first presentation this evening, I'd like to invite Rob Danielle from O'Connor Davies to join us. Every year, the town's finances are audited during the month of April, and Rob is here tonight to give the board some information about how we fared in 2016. Also, our town comptroller, Tom Warren, is here in case we have any additional questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, good evening.
I'm blocking your PowerPoints.
And there's hard
Just gonna
copies
shift-
too. If
Great, but just in case for the audience, it'll be easier, so let me just shift over a little bit. Let's shift over here.
I'm not.
Okay.
It's okay, that's freezing.
The 1, 2, 3 of them.
It's so nice to me.
Oh, now it's too cold.
Cold.
It's good, it's
Too
perfect,
cold.
it's
It's too
perfect.
cold. I was happy.
Okay, I'm happy.
Guy's got no insulation.
It's perfect.
Okay. Well, good evening, and thank you for having us present the audit report, the audit results for the town of Ossining for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2016. I do have a PowerPoint that's up there. Before I begin, I just wanted to thank the supervisor, Ms. Levenberg, the budget director, Maddie, as well as the finance folks, Tom Warren, Dale Ferreira, for one, their professionalism, their audit readiness, and really being available throughout the entire process, audit process. I put together a little agenda. We'll go through a summary overview. We'll describe our audit results, specifically the opinion. I've got a few PowerPoints on the general fund, actual information as compared to your budget, a fund balance comparison, and some revenue and expenditure items, as well as the town outside villages fund. We will touch upon the town's highway fund and special districts fund, as well as its capital fund. Page 3 is a summary overview. Again, the audit process began sometime back in December of 2016, where we performed some planning test work, preliminary test work. We identified the significant audit risk areas, and we performed interviews of various personnel. We did our audit field work or our substantive test work in April, and we followed up and completed the audit in May, and the report's dated May 18th. The deliverables include the independent auditor's report on the basic financial statements, and we'll discuss that. Certain required communications as well as a management letter, and I'm happy to report that there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that were identified. And we also do the town justice court as a separate audit and issue a separate report. Page 4 is our audit results. Again, as I mentioned, we completed our audit, again, in accordance with what we call auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. The objective of our audit is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatements. And as part of the scope of our work, we review management's estimates and accounting treatment that were afforded to significant accounting matters. Again, as far as our audit scope, our scope wasn't directed at the evaluation. Our audit scope was directed at the evaluation of all significant aspects of the town's operation, again, to reduce audit risk to an acceptable level. Our primary focus was not on individual transactions and balances, but on the financial statements taken as a whole. And we are satisfied that the scope of our audit was sufficient for us to express an opinion on these financial statements. We have issued what is termed an unmodified opinion, or as we know it as a clean opinion. An unmodified opinion is the highest level of opinion that an entity can receive, and it basically states that the financial statements present fairly the financial position of the town as of December 31st, 2016, once again in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. Page 5 is a snapshot of your general fund summary, budget compared to your actual. Again, the details are found on page 61 of the basic financial statements. But again, you see there are 4 columns. The original budget is what the town board approved back in the fall of 2015. And in the aggregate, your total revenues in the general fund amounted to $5.2 million. Your expenditures amounted to a little over $4.8 million, representing an excess of revenues over expenses. When we factor in some transfers, you come down to a net change in fund balance. You see the bracketed $56,000. And that really represents 2 components. One piece is $53,880 is what the town had designated in 2015 to be used to balance the 2016 budget. And a small piece, $2,200, represent prior year encumbrances or commitments that automatically roll and amend your current year budget. The middle column is your final budget. There are some adjustments to your revenues and to your expenses. There was also additional money set aside for tax certiorari payments, as well as a transfer to the capital projects fund for various capital improvements. So that was amended upward, and again, you could see on that net change in fund balance, it went from $56,000 to $155,000. The third column is your actual results of the $5.7 million in revenues compared to your final budget of $5.2 million, representing a favorable variance of $483,000. And we'll talk about what derives some of those variances in a future slide. Your expenses were $4.5 million, so your revenues exceeded your expenditures by $1.1 million. When you factor in some transfers, you come down to your net change in fund balance. So the general fund's revenues exceeded expenditures by $651,000 for 2016. So you were able to add that to your fund balance. So you take your opening fund balance of $2.3 million, you add the $651,000, you end the year at a little over $3 million. Page 5 is really the components of how that $3 million is broken down into. There are a couple of buckets, if you will. The town does have prepaid expenditures that are set aside in what we call non-spendable fund balance, and that just means that you paid for some expenses in advance. The cash has gone out the door, the expense hasn't been recognized. That expense will be recognized in 2017, and it will be taken from that bucket, if you will. You do have some assigned fund balance. Again, the small amount, the $1,300, are encumbrances. Those will automatically roll and amend the 2017 budget, the current budget you're in. And the town did designate $75,000 to be used to balance the 2017 budget that you're currently in. And then the unassigned piece is the $2.8 million. So again, we'd like to compare the $2.8 million to your 2017 adopted budget of a little over $5.4 million. And again, you have 52%, extremely healthy fund balance, and that gives the town some avenues to pay for any unforeseen circumstances. They're able to appropriate fund balance to be used in future budgets or to provide for capital improvements without the need to borrow. Page 7 is your budget to actual for your revenues, and as I mentioned before, in the aggregate, those favorable variances were $483,000. These are the components that make up those variances, and I'm just going to talk about some of the significant areas. If you look at your real property taxes came in better than budgeted for a couple of reasons. They were better than anticipated tax collections, as well as a change in the allowance for taxes, which could be a positive or a minus in any particular year. You have your other tax items, which are your pilots. This year you had a gain on the sale of tax-acquired property that wasn't budgeted for. And you also have interest and penalties on real property taxes. But really, the favorable variance was derived from your gain on the sale of tax-acquired property. Your fines and forfeitures did not come in as budgeted. Your fines and forfeitures fell short of budget by about $151,000, and those really are your tickets or your forfeited bail monies. And then another large caption is your state aid, which is really your mortgage tax, and your mortgage tax did about $139,000 better than you anticipated. So very positive and favorable variances on the revenue side. We could skip page 8. I kind of talked about those variances. If we go to page 9 are your expenditures for the general fund. You can see there are savings in all categories. In particular, you could see your general government support had about almost $100,000 in savings, and really the large number there is your employee benefits, which had a favorable variance of $156,000, and that was due to your state retirement. The rates have declined slightly from the prior year, as well as your medical insurance that came in less than what the budget, when the budget was developed. A certain percentage was used to develop based on what was out there and in the market, and those expenditures came in less. But overall, the expense side had a positive variance of $322,000. I just want to point out on page 9 that net change in fund balance category, as I mentioned before, in the original budget, you anticipated using $56,000 of your own funds to balance the budget. In the final budget, that was amended upward to $155,000 for additional tax cert monies, certiorari monies, as well as capital projects. But you look at the third column, and not only did you not need to utilize the $155,000, but you were able to generate $651,000 in earnings or revenues that exceeded expenditures for the year. So from an actual standpoint, you did $651,000 for the year, but from a budgetary standpoint, you actually did $806,000 better than you anticipated, because you didn't have to use your funds, because you were able to generate a profit, if you will. Again, we could skip page 10. I pretty much talked about it. If we go to page 11, this is the Town Outside Villages Fund. Again, the same setup. That the Town Outside Village Fund is used to account for transactions which by statute affect only those areas outside the boundaries of the town, of the village located within the town. But the same setup, you have your original budget, you have your final budget, and your actual results. And from when you take your total revenues in the aggregate, those came in at $3.8 million as compared to your final budget of $3.6 million, a favorable variance of $132,000. Again, we'll discuss where that occurred. On the expense side, your expenses came in better than budgeted, or less than budgeted, $2.8 million versus $3.2 million. Again, a positive variance of $357,000. When you factor in some of the transfers, you come down to that net change in fund balance again, and the Town Outside Villages Fund had revenues that exceeded expenditures by $508,000. Again, that net change in fund balance, the first column there, the $101 of prior year encumbrances, that was amended upward to $50,371,000 for additional tax certiorari's of about $50,000 or so. But again, the town did not need to utilize those funds because it was able to generate $508,000. So you're able to add $508,000 to your fund balance, which began at $2.1 million. So you end the year at $2.6 million. The components of the town outside villages fund balance, again, broken down into three categories, if you will. There are certain prepaid expenditures. There are certain assigned fund balance, and again, those represent encumbrances. But the big number there is your unassigned or your free and clear, if you will, $2.5 million. Once again, a healthy fund balance. When we compare that to your 2017 adopted budget of $4.1 million, you're about 60%. So again, extremely healthy fund balance. Gives you the opportunity to do various capital projects, and also you're able to appropriate, if you will, down the road fund balance for any particular purpose. Again, page 13, those favorable revenue variances for the town outside villages fund. You can see there's a variety of categories there, but the main area is your non-property taxes there. But just want to point out that the town outside villages fund, you can see that of the total revenues, about $2.7 million represent real property taxes, so about 3/4 of the budget of the TOV fund is funded from real property taxes. But you saw savings on the non-property tax, which is your sales tax. That came in about just under $100,000 better than you anticipated. And that really represents the majority of the favorable variance on the revenue side of the TOV fund. If you go to page 15 of the slide, these are the expenditures of the town outside villages fund. Again, positive variances in all categories, mainly in general government support, public safety, again, your police expenditures, as well as employee benefits, state retirement expenditures were down, as well as medical insurance and workers' compensation. Turn to page 17. The town does operate a highway fund. Again, I didn't present it in numbers, but again, the highway fund is found on page 76 and 77 of the financial statements, and that ended the year with revenues that exceeded expenditures by almost $195,000, resulting in an ending fund balance of $970,000, of which $870,000 is assigned for the highway fund. Again, we compare that to the 2017 adopted budget of $2.6 million. Once again, 33% fund balance. Once again, a healthy fund balance for the highway fund. Special district fund accounts for the water, the consolidated sewer districts, the North State Road sewer, the lighting districts, the fire protection, refuse and garbage, and the ambulance funds. Those are found on page 78 through 81 of the financial statements. And those, in the aggregate, the special districts funds ended the year with expenditures that exceeded revenues by $41,000. So that resulted in an ending fund balance that declined by the $41,000 to just about $800,000. Capital Projects Fund, the town has currently about 12 active projects. The Capital Projects Fund does reflect a deficit of $1.6 million. However, there are bond anticipation notes outstanding of $2.4 million. Although certain projects are in a deficit, they are funded with bond anticipation notes, and the accounting treatment of bond anticipation notes are different than bonds, in that these, for a bond anticipation note, the revenue is not recognized until it's paid down or converted to permanent financing. So although you see a deficit in those projects, there is financing for those particular projects. And page 18, lastly, just a couple of other considerations. Your debt service requirements, which is your principal and interest on your bonded indebtedness, over the next couple of years are about $600,000. So from a budget standpoint, that is a very low number. compared to your combined funds, your general fund, your town outside villages fund. We see towns with about 5 to 10% of their budget used for debt service purposes. Not the case here at the town. Very low debt service requirements as compared to your overall town funds. A couple other things I just wanted to point out really don't affect your budget process, but we have your other post-employment benefits, again, that are recorded in the notes to the financial statements, and they're recorded in what we call the entity-wide statements. But again, there's no budgeting for this purpose, but those obligations increased by $770,000. And that's found on page 51 in the notes to the financial statements. Again, there's no funding mechanism in place in New York State, but again, it is a required, something that we need to report for the entity-wide statements. The town does hire an actuary to kind of convert these numbers and tell us what the future liability is, and that liability as of December 31st, 16 is $5.7 million. The town does pay these obligations on a pay-as-you-go basis, roughly about $500,000 on an annual basis. And then lastly, pension reporting, a new pronouncement that came into effect last year. This is year 2. The town is part of the New York State retirement system for the employee retirement system, the ERS. The state retirement is funded at 90.7%, so that the town's portion of that unfunded 9.3% represented a liability of $1.75 million. Again, this is something you don't pay for. It's not something you budget for, but it is a liability that's recorded on the books, and it is an accounting treatment. And then lastly, we do, as part of our audit, we do consider fraud. We do inquiries of management and other personnel throughout the town. We review journal entries for reasonableness and to make sure that there's the underlying support the underlying documentation to back up that support. And we look at canceled checks to ensure that the town is adhering to their check signing policy, and we compare vendors to a paid list. And again, there were no instances of fraud or allegations of fraud that were identified. So overall, a very positive year for the town in all of the funds that we just described.
So, I have a question. Why are actual, Hi. Why are actual real property tax revenues more than are anticipated again? Did better in collections, so we didn't expect to collect from everybody, but we did? Go Gloria.
Every year, there's what we call a 60-day rule. So you're allowed to take into revenue collections that you get in January and February, and that's the cutoff. So that anything not collected is deferred to the subsequent year. So that'll roll into your 16 year, and those may be collected in 16. And we do that same analysis at December 31st of 2016. So you may have people that pay early to take advantage of, tax write-off or what have you. So that can fluctuate.
I
Okay,
think
so
it's
that's,
to account we had a foreclosure auction last year.
That's accounted for in a separate line in other tax items, yeah.
Okay, I don't remember where you identified that, and do you?
There is. It's
is that other
other
tax items?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
What's that?
It would also impact property tax collections.
Yes,
Doesn't reduce your receipt.
right.
Right,
So it has a dual impact.
okay,
Gain on the sale,
right,
you sold it for more than the tax
right.
liability.
And this is Chris. Off.
When
Welcome,
you have
Chris.
an
Thank
auction, it impacts two lines.
Mhm.
One, it impacts and reduces your receivable, thus reducing your need for an allowance,
Mhm.
which generates some revenue. And then the second is the gain on the sale of the property.
Mm-hmm.
If you did happen to sell it for more than the taxes due, you would have a gain on the sale of the property.
Right,
So there's two revenue lines that it would impact.
got it, okay.
Okay, and what's our bond, our debt versus our overall budget? Like, is there a percentage how much we?
I didn't do that calculation because there's components of debt service in all funds. But
Okay.
I would say it's, when I'm looking at about 600,000, I would say it's 3% or even less of your overall.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah.
Right, that was what he was, where
Okay,
you
yeah.
were saying that compared
He
to
said good. I
others,
just, I
Yeah,
saw.
Where-
definitely.
up to that much for other places. I want to know where we were.
I just thank you both, Rob and Chris, and also thanks to our town comptroller and our deputy comptroller, Dale Ferreira and Tom Warren. Also thanks so much to our budget director,
Yes, thank you,
Madeline
Maddie.
Zahach. We're very lucky to have so many great people here on staff and also working with O'Connor Davies to take us through this process and to make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing. And again, I just want to quote you. I think you said a couple times an extremely healthy fund balance in both our general fund as well as our town outside villages fund, which we also call the unincorporated part of the town fund, as well as our, I believe, even in our highway. And one of the expenses we had in our, I think it was the special districts, just to clarify, I think it was about $42,000 that we spent this year on a sewer improvement project that is yet to be realized, but soon, hopefully, to be realized by the New York State Department of Transportation at the intersections of 134 and 9A. And that was an appropriate use of those funds, and we probably are going to anticipate additional use of some of the fund balance in the upcoming year for sewer pump station repairs and other things to make sure that our stuff is flowing smoothly. We don't get any backups or problems, because none of us like that.
Didn't we use some of our fund balance for
That's what I just said.
no, also for a truck and some
Not in the
tools, or not
sewer-
in the
not for the sewer.
not for the store one, no.
No.
But some of our from highway.
Yeah, I was just talking about special district
Okay.
sewer.
But we were able to really not bond for some expensive items.
Correct,
And
and-
we're able to do
right,
that.
and then
But
ends
that'll
up-
show up on the next one, right?
When we are able to use fund balance and not bond, it saves us money. So if we're
Absolutely.
able to do that and save money for our taxpayers, we think that that's a good
Yeah.
use of
Not
fund
paying
balance.
interest really works for me. Okay.
Are there other
Much,
questions?
everybody.
Anybody else have any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you very
We
much.
appreciate all
Thank
the
you.
time that you take. All right. Our second presentation this evening is from, I think, Dan Welsh and anybody else who's coming up with, who are joining us from Sustainable Westchester. Sustainable Westchester brings together most of the municipalities in our county to work together on projects that decrease our impact, our negative impact on the environment, hopefully increase our positive impact on the environment.
I really wish I needed a car.
Yeah, it's a great time to buy a Nissan Leaf. We've been talking about the great deal that's being offered right now in Westchester County, so do remember to take advantage of that. I think you got to go down to New Rochelle with a special number in hand, and there's a dealership, a Nissan dealership there that's working with the state and the county
That's
to
right.
take
And
advantage.
I did that on Friday
Did you?
because my existing Leaf lease actually ended on Friday.
Oh, you
So
could do a lease or buy.
No,
Just a
I
buy.
had, just by total coincidence, we were leasing a Leaf.
Uh-huh.
And we leased it out of, actually, Wilton. We live up in Lewisboro, so that was pretty close.
Uh-huh.
And the lease came due on Friday. We drove in and we gave them the car in the morning. In the evening, we went down to New Rochelle and we signed up for a new one to buy.
With greatly reduced, I think there's $19,000 in essentially in rebates or
It's
incentives.
amazing. Now, this car, car salesman here for a second, but it's, it's not for everybody. I've used it for a number of years now. It's certainly works if you're like a two-car family and, you've got one car which is a hybrid or, uses gas. And so when we go up to see the kids, we use in Boston, we use my wife's Volt, and that gets us there. My original Leaf is 80 miles nominal range. Maybe it'll go to 90 during the summer, 75 in the winter. But my commute is to Mount Kisco and back. So I go there and it still gets me to Ossining or White Plains. And if I have to stop in Bedford in the evening on the way home for 20 minutes charge, I do that. And it works out fine for me. And you wave at the gas stations as you go by. And in the 3 years that we've had it, we've had a total of maintenance of just swapping the tires out once. And
Wow.
that was it. Never did
Incredible.
anything. So just in terms of kind of headaches and everything.
And it gives you free charge point charges.
There's
for 2
still a
years,
lot
I
of
believe, right?
free charging out there. I know part of the deal is 2 years free
Years.
charging. That's not every system because there's a proliferation of providers for those. So I think on the DC fast charge systems, which Ron is going to plot out a map of those. But we found, say in Ridgefield, Connecticut, behind the town hall, there's a free one. So we go in, we have dinner at one of the restaurants, and we charge. Same thing in Bedford. If it's it's at the train station, so if it's after the commuting hours, you can go and park there, and
And, hope,
you know.
and soon you'll be able to come to Austining, and we have one right now at our Department of Public Works, but we soon will have 3. One at the train station in our town park area near the train station at Engle Park, and then one at Ryder Park and the other at Cedar Lane Park. So lots of
Great.
good places to enjoy a beautiful day and some exercise and mind, body, spirit, Austining, anything
Yeah.
else. you think of.
So,
question.
I'm one now.
Everybody keeps saying it's $19,000 in rebates, but what can you expect to pay?
So it's the 19,000 is comprised of the $10,000 negotiated discount, so that comes right off the top. There's I think 1,750 or something is the New York State subsidy. That comes right off the top. The remainder is the $7,500 federal tax credit. So, not giving out accounting advice here, but your accountant's just
It
left.
starts
But
at 30,000.
But that's a dollar for dollar credit, so that doesn't, you don't get that back until you do
But
your
the-
taxes, and assuming you have the credits to give.
But
Yeah.
the cost of the car
Nets out
is
because
$11,000 or something like that.
it was like this one, I didn't get the jacuzzi or anything like that with it, so it was about 34,000 starting price, and it netted down to under 15.
So is that cheaper than your lease?
Well, the lease
Payments are now cheaper than the
Yeah,
lease?
I don't know yet what that. I mean, if it depends. If we were to take that 15,000 and finance it over, 3 years? So that's 5,000 a year. Divide that by say, whatever. Would it be cheaper? I'm not sure. But then we'd own it outright, right? So, I mean, I'm sure if you do an NPV on it or something, and look at it nets out, much better over time. And then cash flow, you can always, like, if you want to finance just that 7,500 or whatever, the dealers always, they'll point you to their finance guy, and they'll take care of that stuff. So
So we spent a lot of time talking about something that we were not planning to talk about, but
Well,
are always happy to talk about. Which
I
is
think it's great because we consider all this stuff sort of part of the new energy ecosystem, right? And I made that pitch to you at the microgrid event that we had as well. And all these things are coming together, whether it be electric vehicles eventually being part of a vehicle to grid scenario where you can make money on your car because at peak hours they're gonna tap into it for a little bit. It's all coming, and that's what we feel like we're constructing. So we're here to talk about the CCA, but there is a lot of other cool things going on in sustainable Westchester, and Austining has been a great and reliable member since the beginning. So we're happy for that. Got a pile of paper there. I'm not going to go line by line through it. It's some reference stuff, but I'll call out some things. I mean, the number one thing I think to point out is that we are still here, and it worked, and that's a pretty amazing thing in and of itself. We're still the first one and only one in operation in New York State.
We are being Westchester Power.
Westchester Power, that's
Okay.
correct, from Westchester. Yes, and I've been to several conferences where people from all the state are getting together and trying to brainstorm how to form their own, and they're always picking our brains on this, and I hope they go ahead and they go one step further so we can learn from them, but today we're the only one in operation. And the good news is also that we have saved people a little bit of money, not a huge amount, and there's a graph here with the way the rates have been going. And of course, this is always a fun discussion that our great office staff have on a day-to-day basis with people that call in. Jenna Amundsen kind of pretty much runs what's going on in the office here. And Jasmine is our new addition, Jasmine Graham, and she's already digging into some really interesting projects for us. And so the office is still the heart of things. We do take phone calls. We're adding people to the roles on a regular basis because we are now essentially the supplier of default for the participating towns. So if somebody moves into the neighborhood and calls up Con Ed and signs up, they will be rolled into the CCA, into Westchester Power, on a periodic basis. It's quarterly. So it's always like a new startup for us in that respect. And you know, it remains kind of an odd concept for people, and we still have a lot of work to do do outreach and let people know what it is they're participating in. But as I say, we have some great staff, and they enjoy those conversations. We have been also in furtherance of the outreach, we've been working with a communications company that's helped us get our message out into print. And so there's some reference to where we've shown up to now, you know, the Westchester Business Journal and a lot of the newspapers. So I think that's helped a bit as well, and it's something that we would have had a hard time doing on our own, buried in our sort of day-to-day business. Another highlight that I'd like to make you aware of is the signing of a contract with a data services provider. So up to now, office operations in terms of the data have been spreadsheets coming to me from the suppliers, and me trying to take those, doing my crosstabs and all the rest of this stuff to answer questions about, hey, how are we doing? You know, how many people are in the program? How much green power have we supplied? And it hasn't been easy doing that. And it also leaves us in a position where it's harder for us to catch things that may have been trending in a certain way. And do good reporting for the towns and the individuals who are in the program. So by porting our data into the systems of this data services company, which has years and years of working in the retail electric industry, we're going to be able to have the Ossining screen up there where you can go at any time and see how the various benchmarks of the program have been doing. You know, how much CO2 you've avoided, how many kilowatt hours have flown through the program, the net savings, et cetera. What we can say about those savings for now, as I say, they haven't been huge, maybe something like $25 or $30 per resident. And what did we say, about 1,400 households in the program in Ossining. So, you know, it adds up to $30,000 or something like that, which is not going to change the finances, especially as good a financial health as your town is in, having just sat through the auditor's report. I'm very impressed. I'm on the board in Lewisboro, so. But it's a real savings, and this is just the first year of the program. We can't guarantee where rates will go relative to the variable rates, but in general terms, if you have a fixed rate, it's a kind of averaging of what people expect the rates to be doing, and it wouldn't be a surprise to see that we do even better in the next half of the half year. The other really important thing that I'd like to talk about in terms of the nuts and bolts is that we will be hitting 2 years next April, which,
Before you get into that, can you talk
Yeah.
about the monetary savings? Can you talk a little bit about the aggregate carbon savings?
So I don't have a good number for you right now. I think we had an infographic in here which is now stale, and
Okay.
we're probably at double that. So program wide, in here we have 164,000 tons total CO2 across the program. Saved, right, or mitigated, or
Right.
avoided,
Avoided,
or
yes.
yes. So I'm going to say it's probably actually double by this, and that's why I'm anxious to get the real-time
Got
or
it.
almost real-time information up there.
Okay.
And of course, Ossining town is not the largest town in the aggregation, so you're going to be, proportionally a piece of that.
Sure.
But it is significant, and the fact that we had Ossining and 13 other towns opt for the 100% green product right out of the starting gate is just amazing, actually.
I mean,
it's
just to talk about being part of a collective and having community choice aggregation make this possible. I mean, I don't think it's that critical. I mean, it's nice to say, okay, what piece of the pie does Austin contribute? But I think the fact that all of the communities coming together made a decision to do this, and then on top of it, some made the decision to do the 100% sustainable, that is what makes that difference.
You are so right. It was really, shoulder to shoulder, and let's face it, it was a new program, so municipalities are not known for being out on the cutting edge all the time. So everybody had to get in there. 20 municipal lawyers looking at the agreements, and this was no minor accomplishment. So that's one of the reasons.
You see Christie's face.
Yeah. Were you part of that melee?
Yes.
But it happened, and it's really phenomenal, actually. And that's the fact that we had Sustainable Westchester here, and supervisors, mayors who were familiar with the organization, with the track record of the organization. They knew this was not some frivolous thing. We've been involved early on through ENUAC in the creation of Energize New York. You folks are familiar with that, and the idea of creating this type of self-sustaining and sustainable program, I think, was not foreign to everybody, and so that helped a lot. And a lot of the other counties that are trying to do this aren't necessarily that far along. So that's one of the big things that helped us. It was really a courageous move, and it's paid off.
Now you can talk about nuts and bolts.
What was I going to talk about?
Nuts and bolts.
Nuts and
Moving
bolts.
forward, 2-year contract.
Yeah. So anyway, the timeline is such that we started up in April, May of 16. So we're coming up in 18 on that 2-year contract, and backing away from that, we should have an implementation plan update to the Public Service Commission within 120 days of that. That's 4 months or so. That's really the beginning of the year, which tells me that we want to be through the fall and the winter. We want to make any changes to the program that we're interested in making, and some of those we don't know exactly what they're going to be right now. There are some exciting possibilities that are out there, and I don't know that we'll nail them down or not, but one of them would be, for example, community solar as an integrated part of the CCA supply. Now, it's not immediately obvious how to do that, because there's little boxes that the PSC drew around all these different programs, and they don't necessarily overlap. Community solar, for example, you need to have any individual subscriber currently under the rules needs to have at least 1,000 kilowatt hours a year out of the system. Obviously, if we take one project and we dilute it in the CCA, you're not going to make that. I guess I jumped ahead. For the audience, community solar is a schema by which if you can't put solar on your own house, maybe you have shade or you're in a multifamily situation, you may be able to participate in a large project down the street on a public building or a warehouse or in some open space or a brownfield site that is just looking for something constructive to be done with. And you can subscribe to that project, and it looks to you almost as if it was on your own roof. You kind of get a piece of that. You get credits for it against your bill, and you're likely to, if it works out, you're likely to see savings on that. So that's something we've been working on kind of in parallel tracks. Again, we look at these all as sort of pieces that are eventually weaving together in kind of this new energy outlook for Westchester. And whether or not it actually integrates or not, we've been doing work The same data provider that we're using for our regular data, their big focus is in this kind of community energy project, and they have the platform to do that. It's a complicated business because it's got to speak to the utilities. It has to have the interface for the individual subscriber, the developer, and the project owner. And so what we did is we vetted all these platforms. We did an RFP. We got indicative pricing from them all, and these guys looked far and away the best in terms of their technical bench and the indicative pricing. And so we have an initial partnership with them where they're going to let us use their platform to just start signing people up. Say, are you interested? Then put your name in, and then we can then take that and turn around to developers and say, look, I got a bunch of people here that are ready to do this. Bring us a project, give us the price per kilowatt hour. So that's our basic scheme before CCA. If we're able to integrate it into the CCA, it'll be almost seamless. So we won't have the whole subscriber process will kind of go away, and it will be a part of the supply. That's, as I say, there's a whole lot of talk and people running up and down to the PSC and working on how to put together a plan that'll speak to that. We'll see if that's a part of the schema that we bring to you in the fall. But anyway, so in the timeline-wise, that's what we'll be doing, coming to you with any modifications from the sort of plain vanilla startup program that we have now.
Can I just say that the PSC is the Public Service Commission?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry. This is a problem when you live
Acronyms.
in this
Yeah,
world.
acronyms are always a
Yes.
problem.
Always an issue.
Feel free to call me out on that anytime. Yeah, well, they are the overseeing organ up in Albany, and the whole reason that we exist is because they issued the order allowing first our program to go forward on its own. That was the pilot order. And then just basically at the same time we started up, they issued the general order, which says, hey, you know what, this is great. Everyone can do it in New York State. So there's that order kind of is the sandbox that we play in. And it determines all the data security and all the ways that we operate. So we would, to the extent that we are thinking of doing things that are more creative, we have to go to them and say, hey, and actually I've been doing that on kind of a regular basis. For example, the work that we're doing to try and help people understand better the opportunities in microgrids. Sent a note up to the PSC. I said, that we see this as part of our overall assistance to the towns in working on how to take advantage of the opportunities in this new, the new systems, and sent it up to the Tina Palmieri. She's like the vice department head up there, and she came back and said that sounds consistent with your. So we're poking at these things all the time because they only write so much in the order, and we're not sure what we can do, what we can't do. So that's both a challenge and an opportunity, and we're trying to make more of the latter of it.
Great.
So.
So we're going to await more information in the fall when you'll have
Yeah,
information for us about
we'll
any
certainly
modifications?
we'll want to do another like community outreach event of some sort. So any suggestions you have about the kind of forum that we might want to, is it just a hearing here, or do we go to the library and kind of
Yeah.
do?
I think
you
we
know-
would go to the library, and probably we would try to coordinate with the village, since there's no need for us to
Mhm.
do it solo.
Yeah,
That
so
would
we'd
be-
want to, wake people up again because let's face it, they get their power bill and they pay it, and that's it. A lot of people don't think about it. So have a little event up there, talk about where we've been, some of these interesting new things that we're looking to do. Get more input, make sure that they know, and that way, as you make your decision about going forward into the next round, everybody's had their shot at it. So we'd like
I think it's great news that there actually was a savings, because I think at some point it wasn't clear that there was going to be, even though it's little.
Yeah.
It means that nobody's paying more than they would have
Yes.
had they not
That's
switched,
right.
right?
That's right.
So
And
that's
frankly,
nice news.
in the NYSEG territory, the 4 towns that are up there, they've been in the red. They've just come into the black recently, and but their contract is longer too. It's 3-year contract, so they have sort of more time for this, all the fluctuations float out. But those first few months, everybody's like, oh, which is understandable. But you kind of hope that people can step back and say, well, we're not day trading here. We've locked in at a good, competitive low rate, and we think we're going to end up in good shape.
Is there any thought about gas? Because I know that was part of the conversation.
That was, and I personally am ready to entertain that. There's competing schools of thought, and I'll tell you that when I brought it up to the board, there were some gasps, and because there's an activist side which says we don't want to, increase the amount of gas activity. Our whole thing is renewables, but my point to them was, we could conceivably design a program which inherently encourages energy reduction. So you could design that right into the program and put that out as part of your RFP. Say that you, supplier, have to participate in demand reduction activities of such and such a nature and hit such and such benchmarks, and sort of have the best of both worlds. We can say, look, at least we're doing something here to constrain the expansion so that people don't need to build new pipelines and new whatever, So I think you could do it in a way that was consistent with our mission, and I think we should probably be looking at that. We haven't gotten to it yet, and if you folks think that is something that we should look at a little harder, I would welcome your inputs.
And I just think that again, the notion of community choice aggregation and to ultimately bring rates down for ratepayers is a good thing.
Right.
I understand, again, maybe there's incentive to convert. I don't know how
That could be built in. That could be built into it.
with the gas
Right.
suppliers, but
Yeah, it could be a new, some kind of incentive in there for people to go to the new air-to-air heat exchanger, or heat exchanger type products, and go away from gas. Which would be, yes, it'd be odd for a supplier. They wouldn't, but if it's a contract and it's built that way, and you want the contract, then
exactly.
So you have a lot of leverage.
Right.
So.
And that's a good advantage. And I think,
That's right.
I think that, are you at a point yet where you're self-sustaining based on, that's great.
Oh yeah.
Financially
Yeah.
healthy, Westchester Power is financially healthy.
Oh,
as a
yes.
Yes.
We're doing well. So, it's about taking what little discretionary funds and figuring out how to leverage that into these new programs that, increase the virtuous cycle and bring more savings back into the program. So that's the really exciting part, that we build. The basic bulk purchase is just a platform for a whole lot of other exciting stuff.
It's fantastic, and we are very appreciative. Does anybody else have any questions for Dan, or?
When do you expect to have to nail down the rate for the next oncoming term?
So what we do is we go into the fall. We'd say, what is this new? What are the benchmarks that we want for this new contract, or new twists like the community solar, if those things are available, and then we would jointly establish the targets for the RFP. So in the first round, we agreed on we said that if the quotations came in at lower than the trailing 12 months average, then we'd go ahead. So in order to give the assurance to the bidders, we did, all the towns signed off on this MOU, which said, I will execute the contract if those conditions are met. So the process would be that we would
You'll
agree
do
on,
that again.
on
Okay.
what that new set of criteria would be.
In the fall.
Yeah. In the
Okay,
fall. Yep,
thank you.
Sure.
I have a one-off question.
Sure.
I actually had somebody ask me this today, and I told them to go call them, but it's always been said that even if we change our supplier, that the delivery charges is still Con Ed, because Con Ed owns the infrastructure, right, for the delivery?
Yes.
This person said that their bill, they're not part of the CCA. They went with an ESCO. I guess they were forward thinkers back then, and they already have a contract with an
Sure.
ESCO.
Sure.
And they're saying that on their bill, they have delivery charges on both bills, on both. I told him to call the ESCO.
Recharges on,
Both the gas and the
Both
electric.
both gas and electric on Con Ed and then on the ESCO bill.
so why wouldn't there be delivery charges for both of them?
Because there's only one system?
So your bill is, you have the delivery and the energy supply.
Right.
And delivery is pretty much what it is, independent of the energy supply. They're going to have the same, for that same number of kilowatt hours, it's going to be the same for them as it is for us, with one tiny little exception that was just pointed out to me by Lindsay Auden of Croton, who's the authority on all these numbers, that actually we and people in ESCOs have a slight advantage over utility power customers, in as much as apparently on the delivery side you avoid some portion of the sales tax. I think it's maybe the state portion. And so there's actually an advantage on that side of things to people who go with private suppliers or us.
So you do pay delivery on both?
Yes, yes.
I think I know what you're trying to say. So you saying that, I used to have Robeson, you're saying there'd be a delivery charge on the Robeson and the Con Ed bill? No, I used to only have a delivery bill from Con Ed and a straight supply bill from Robeson.
He's saying he
So
has a
I do not
delivery on
understand
both.
why they would
Then
have a separate delivery.
Have him, if he could, do a scan, send it to us. We can walk him. We walk people through bills every day.
All the time.
They're real. The bills are awful. I've complained. That every time I get with the Department of Public Service people, that's my number one item is the bill is our guaranteed contact with every customer. We are missing the chance to have a good, clear conversation with them, do something about this, because the bills are, it's part of the Con Ed systems, and the utility systems are truly, ancient, and there's gerbils running around in wheels, and, who knows? You can't, anything,
Purposely
we
confusing.
can't do that.
Purposely
So,
confusing.
they're wonderful people, but it is a struggle sometimes to move the battleship. So that's one of them. No.
Well, thank you
Thank
for
you.
all the
Thank
work
you.
that you're doing on behalf of all the towns
you.
and villages in Westchester
Thank
County.
you
and
very much for your support, and anytime, any questions, any ideas, let us know.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Have a great night.
Good. Did we leave enough of these with us? Do you need another copy, or?
Yeah. Okay. We're good. Thank you. All right. So next up, a topic that is very familiar to all of us. Our planning consultant, David Stolman, is here to present the most recent iteration of the proposed zoning law that we've been working on for over a year. When we last saw David, like this is like the next in the
David.
mini-series. So I'm just like finally
You're cold
comfortable.
again?
When we last saw David,
Really?
he went over the maximum possible density that would be allowed on the sites that we have been discussing, specifically in Crotonville. Both David and this board agreed that it was too dense and we needed to have another look. So David is here with revisions. And I have asked that he also review the entire body of the proposed new law as a way for us to get us a little closer to closure on this. This does not mean we will not be continuing to look at our zoning. In fact, as we have worked on this law and heard from our residents, it seems even more likely that this will open up a greater conversation about how we zone and plan comprehensively into the future. So with that, I turn it over to our planner, David Stallman. Thank you, David, for coming, and I'm going
It's good to be here. Thank
Back
you for
over.
that wonderful introduction. I don't think I've ever said that before in 4 decades. So, as Dana said, this is primarily a recap. So I think all of the board members and others here are familiar with these provisions of the local law. The last 2 slides are new. So let's start the recap. So with respect to the Crotonville rezoning, the local law leaves the existing neighborhood commercial zone intact. It rezones a relatively large parcel on Stanley Avenue, and actually that parcel also has frontage on Old Albany Post Road, and it zones that relatively large parcel from GB1 to neighborhood commercial. The local law rezones a relatively small parcel, and that is Mr. Fiorito's parcel, who is in the audience here, rezones a relatively small parcel on Old Albany Post Road from GB1 to NC. And lastly, rezones a parcel on Cliff Drive from R5 to R7.5.
And I'm just going to editorialize a tiny bit here, which is that, just to refresh everybody's memory,
I'm going to my car. It's too cold in here.
where are you going, to your car?
Yeah.
Get a jacket.
Oh, to get a jacket?
Yeah, she's not
I thought
leaving.
I thought she was going to her to No, because I'm so comfortable finally.
It's not 75 in here.
I'm too warm.
I'm perfect.
Okay, so I just wanted to remind everybody, while Councilwoman Jeffrey goes to her car, to get warm, that this, again, the reason that we are here and that we've had a moratorium imposed is because we were looking to update our comprehensive plan recommendations that had not been adopted, into the, code from this, or the original comprehensive plan was from 2002, and there were a couple of specific areas that were needing to be looked at, and these were the areas that were recommended from the comprehensive plan. So I just wanted to remind everybody, laying the foundation again for why we were looking at this, and these were areas that were recommended to be rezoned as residential. At the beginning, we received a lot of pushback from our local business entities, who are along that area, that basically said they felt that their land values would diminish if we were to change the zoning to residential. So, we had a lot of back and forth with the community over the last year plus, and we, the board sort of came to the conclusion that, the NC district would be a compromise, and would also get us on a direction of going fully residential possibly into the future, if in fact, for whatever reason, NC did not seem to be the best, highest use. We also have residential built into that NC, so again, we feel like it's a transition, so continue.
Right.
Sorry.
Just to editorialize a little bit more, this is, I think, the third effort to implement comprehensive plan recommendations into the development regulations of the town. And not to be critical of anyone in any way, but the first effort, the town board took all the lowest hanging fruit. And in the second effort, the next lowest hanging fruit. So the effort that this town board is making is kind of the hardest stuff. If we go to the next slide.
The highest hanging fruit.
Right.
Hardest to reach.
Yes, yes. This
Yeah,
is
this-
the proposed zoning map, and do you want to try to point out a little bit of this? There at the very top, that small parcel is Mr. Fioreto's parcel, and the proposal is to change that from GB1 to NC. And similarly, there's that relatively large 2-acre, not 4-acre, but 2-acre parcel on Stanley Avenue and Old Albany Post Road that would go from GB1 to NC. And then this parcel here that Maddie is now showing us would go from R5 to R7.5, one residential zone to a residential zone with a slightly larger minimum lot size. And the existing NC zoning would remain intact. Okay. And then in terms of buffers and setbacks, the local law provides for an increase in buffers and setbacks between a non-residential use and an adjacent residential use or zone. And I should say that this whole area was improved in different versions of, succeeding versions of the local law. Secondly, native non-invasive evergreen and deciduous species are specified for the landscape screening. And third, the planning board can use fencing to supplement, but not to replace landscape screening.
All right.
Next. And then there are, as the supervisor mentioned, there are new uses added to the NC district, and these would be artist live workspaces, mixed uses, mixed use being a non-residential use on the ground floor and a residential use or apartments above. And then we would add single-family, two-family, and multifamily homes to the district as well. And right now, the GB1 zoning district refers in terms of permitted uses to the GB district, which is along North State Road. And it's much more appropriate for the GB1 zoning district to have its own set of appropriate uses, which would be more protective of the environment than is currently the case. So there are specific uses just for the GB1 district. And then we have new definitions and improved definitions in the zoning law for terms including artist live workspace, bed and breakfast establishment, inn, mixed use, residentially zoned lot, retail store or shop, wholesale establishment, and structural soil. And we're going to talk a little more about structural soil later. The local law provides additional lighting standards for cabarets, and it clearly highlights and references the noise standards which are applicable to cabarets. The local law has these residential bulk rate regulations where the standards relate the maximum permitted floor area of a single-family home to its lot area. So there's a maximum amount of floor area, and it's quite generous, but it'll avoid the development of McMansions. And then in terms of bed and breakfast establishments, we have regulations in the local law for the operation and the maximum size of B&Bs. There are dark sky restrictions, or so-called dark sky restrictions. The local law includes limitations on the amount of outdoor lighting associated with development projects to that needed for safety and security only, and to avoid
Which way
Light
the lights are
pollution.
aimed, and so that we don't create a,
and to avoid hot spots or bright spots in the nighttime. And then the local law requires the use of permeable pavement to assist with stormwater management, and structural soils, which are basically soils with voids built in. The first structural soil invented up at Cornell to benefit the health of landscaping in certain situations where you have pavement very close to the tree itself. The local law includes requirements of plans, sections, elevations, perspectives, and other types of presentations to help the planning board and the public envision the potential impact of development projects. And then with respect to the tree protection law and in terms of mitigation for tree removal, in connection with subdivisions and site plan applications, the provisions provide for the on-site replacement of 50% of the aggregate diameter of removed trees. So it's a replacement of 50% of the biomass essentially. And with the approval of the town board, the off-site replacement of 50% of removed trees and or payment into a tree bank fund would be permitted as well.
What did the planning board have to say about that one?
When the planning board got the version of the local law that was being entertained by the town board at the time, it included this 50% replacement in all situations, single-family homes, two-family homes, etc. And the planning board thought that was financially onerous and recommended to the town board that it only occur with respect to new subdivisions or new multifamily development involving a site plan. And that's the
Okay,
way it was changed.
Thank you.
Sure. And then this relates to what, Dana, you were talking about before, where we selected a parcel and did some sketches on that 2-acre parcel on Stanley Avenue. And we found that with respect to artist live work, you could get about 39 dwelling units, artist live work spaces on that property, which we thought was too much, actually much too much. So now we've changed it so that the density would be the same for single-family, two-family, multifamily, artist live work, and then there's an associated, we'll go over the mixed use in a moment, but this density, no more than one artist live work space per 5,000 square feet of lot area, is the same as the single-family, it's an R5 density, same as single-family two-family, multifamily, et cetera. So one could get about 8 dwelling units per acre at this 5,000 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit, or on that 2-acre piece, you'd get 16 instead of 39.
That's a better number.
But if somebody wanted to do it on the part that's going from R5 to R7.5, do they have to stay within the restrictions of 7.5?
Yes, and that would be, yes, and that's a single-family zone, which would permit one dwelling unit, one single-family detached dwelling unit
You wouldn't have an artist.
for 7,500 square feet of lot area. And then this is actually the last slide. The maximum allowable density of a mixed-use development would be based upon one dwelling unit per 10,000 square feet. So that would be 4 dwelling units per acre. And then that would be on top, and then below you would have non-residential. So this is essentially the same density as everything else. Once you add in the non-residential floor area on the ground floor below the apartments above in the mixed use.
That's better.
And that is basically it.
All right, let's go to the work session part of this. Any discussion?
I mean,
I feel like this has been a very iterative and open process, even though we have had people who have said otherwise. I think that, we've we've spent a lot of time discussing these iterations. I'm very thankful for the public participation that we've had along the way from all of the interested parties who helped us even identify that as recently as, last couple of meetings, that we probably were zoning for too high density, and to take a look at what the maximum would be. And I think that we're all very grateful for that.
I have one more question.
I feel that I have this general feeling that we're reaching readiness to now finalize this. I think we'd have to continue the public hearing for one more meeting, and then we would see where we were at with this new iteration.
Yeah, the public hearing is currently open and to be continued to next week's meeting, I believe.
Yes, we have slated for
So
July.
that would be what would happen at that meeting. I think we would have to look between now and then at some procedural issues and make sure that there's no loose ends that have to be tied up
Okay.
from legal compliance perspective, but we can certainly look at that. And then, this board just has to, decide based upon what it hears at the public hearing. And, I think you probably know at this point what you're going to hear. And then you just have to decide whether you're comfortable with closing the public hearing. And then at that point, we still have to finish up seeker, right?
I have to provide a revised EAF,
Right,
and presumably this will lead to a negative declaration, so.
right. So there's some secret
to
steps that
revise
we would
that
have
as
to
well.
take before we should close the public hearing. So we would also have to talk to David about timing for that,
Okay.
because that, that's.
I can have those things done by Tuesday next week.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean,
That'd
we
be
can,
great.
we can take a look at that. It's just,
I don't mean to rush things, but
I mean, I think
Please,
the
rush
board would be
things.
happy. Yeah, it's just, at this point, there are just a few,
Sure.
logistical and
Yeah.
procedural issues that we have to make sure are all taken care of before the board can actually take any action.
We should just make sure that within whatever those are, that we're still within the framework of can we get through and do we have to extend the moratorium, or can we be good with where we're at?
Well, that's certainly something we would have to consider in the timing of everything. If,
Right.
I believe right now it's scheduled to go until August 7th.
Right.
So, if we're looking at next week and the board, and depending on where we line up, it may be something where we have to go another month or so.
Okay.
Just wanted to be sure that the new density allows for a two-family house on that small parcel.
it does, because that parcel is, my number is 11,472 square
Okay,
feet.
just,
And you need 10,000 square feet.
okay, just wanted to be sure.
Yes,
Thank
yeah,
you.
Yeah, good question. I think we sent this to the county a second time.
Yes. very recently, but not this version.
Again.
One more time, and we
Those are the
anticipate,
types of things that we
Yeah.
want, that we
One
want to take
more
a look
time.
at.
right, and we anticipate, and we haven't really heard back from any of the entities except for the county, and the county said, yep, this is within your purview, town to do this, and we don't have any comments, as long as all of your folks are good with it. That was what I read from what they said, what they had gotten back to us, so. You are dismissed.
Oh, good.
Free to go?
Crickets,
You are free
crickets.
to go on your own volition.
I love when the police say that, don't you?
Yes, so thanks very
No
much.
comment.
And we had nobody else, no other comments, all right? I asked 5 times, okay.
Good seeing you.
Thanks so much, we appreciate the PowerPoint and the review of where we are at today, so thanks very much. Okay, you too.
Good night.
All right, so next up, we we still have McCarthy Drive on here, but okay. We tabled our discussion on McCarthy Drive. Our town village engineer, Paul Fraley, was not available this evening, and he had a little more work to do with our other engineer, Dan Ciarcia, who'd been working on discussing McCarthy Drive, because we've had many questions over the years about whose road is McCarthy Drive, and for further discussion on that, we have been actively researching that. We asked our council to look into it, and they've given us a memo on that, which was actually a confidential memo. Before we move forward, we wanted to get some kind of a sense of how we might move forward if in fact the town felt that the memo indicated that this really is a public road, which I believe we think it is, that it is a town road.
Who's we?
We discussed it in executive session.
No, I don't, I just didn't know who you meant. Yeah, I think we
As in the town board, including everybody unanimously indicated that at an executive session. And yes, absolutely did. And witnesses here. So including you, Councilwoman Jeffrey. And we discussed how we would move forward, which included getting estimates to restore and bring that up to public standards.
Okay, so we'll talk about that with Paul when he's available.
Yes.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Moving on.
Moving on, we have been approached by the Village of Austining to jointly pay for grant writing services for an urban circulator, which was part of the Downtown Revitalization Initiative grant that the village put in for as part of the competition for $10 million for one municipality in each of the 10 regions in the state. One of the recommendations that has come out of the Regional Economic Development Councils is that if you apply for for one of the DRIs, and you don't get it, you may have a good chance of getting some other money in the CFA, in the Consolidated Funding Application process, which is sort of the blown out version of where you can apply for all grants statewide. Almost all of them are due at the end of July 28th, I believe, is the deadline. And one of the pieces of the Downtown Revitalization Initiative was this urban circulator, which we've talked about for many, many, many years, also known as a trolley or a jitney service. And one of the things that seems to be high on the list that pops again and again in a number of public forums has always been the notion that we make it easier for people to get up the hill from the train station, get around town, and connect a lot of the directions that may not be currently accessible through public transportation. So that notion of an urban circulator, which would connect critical nodes of business, residential development, historic sites, and tourist attractions potentially, such as the hopefully on the map one of the days in the 10 years down the line future, the Sing Sing Prison Museum and other areas of interest or activity like our parks and open spaces. That's what this urban circulator would look at. So Emergent Urban Concepts, also known as Jared Rodriguez, who's somebody that is working with us on this look at North State Road, worked on the DRI application for the village, and this was a piece of that proposal. As I mentioned, there is now a proposal before the village, and they've asked us to share the expense to study this urban circulator grant proposal, for him to write a number of different proposals. I think there's 3 included, and I had circulated a copy of his proposal to, I think it went out this weekend with, Maddie sent it to everybody, but I have copies of it if you want to look at it now. Which is,
That's small.
and I
Can I ask
actually
a question while
yeah,
you're, I'm confused. So an urban circulator is like a jitney or a trolley?
correct.
Okay. And the village is asking us to share in the expense for a grant writer to write this?
Correct, is
And-
$3,500 total.
Okay. But, which isn't a lot. But why do they believe that we should share in, what
I
benefit
think that
is there?
it would be looking at something that would hit the village and town, so it would actually go potentially out to North State Road. I mean, I've often thought, like, I always say, I want to draw the Venn diagram that actually includes the Scarborough train station as well as the Ossining train station, brings people up and into the business corridors in all 3. So Briarcliff, Ossining, right? So North State Road, Pleasantville Road, Croton Avenue, Main Street, and then, again, down to the train stations and probably out, to connect up with any other public transportation sites
Well,
like
but what is
9A.
the village thinking? I know that's great that you're
Right,
thinking it, but what are
right.
they thinking?
Well, so you know what? I think that that's why they wanted to include the town, because it says the town would primarily benefit commuters and residents needing to traverse the downtown area on a more frequent basis than the Beeline bus schedule. The service may be on demand, but they haven't, and it says an outline points of interest or activity. So outline would be potentially us, and that would be part of what would come out of the study if we were to share with it. So one of the things that I don't think is clearly defined here is it seems like it is more focused on the village, and I would ask that if we are to share in that it actually be blown out to include the town. So
It would be really great to be able to have people who rely on public transportation be able to visit T-Town and other places more regularly. I mean, I think this is a fabulous idea.
It's
and-
great if
If it goes to the outlying
village-
areas.
right.
if the
Yeah, but
village
that's
envisions that.
where, well, I mean,
But they
No.
don't say so, so.
Right.
well,
So that's-
I think
that's
it's
what we'd
something,
like
I
to
think it's something
clarify.
we should
Right.
explore, and I also think that the art, I think what might make the village sensitive to that is there are a lot of village residents, like, I don't know what the percentage, but I would say it's a relatively significant percentage that rely on public transportation. But they can't rely on that to do things within the town of Ossining. So, this isn't like a town versus village thing. It really engages, it allows everybody who lives in Ossining or to be able to access places that, are not as frequently accessed by people who don't have public transportation, or don't have their own transportation. Yeah.
Okay, so you basically are in favor of this idea as long as we clarify the language in this proposal to more clearly include the
Points
the
within
town.
the town.
Can I make a recommendation also? You may want to be a signatory on this
Okay,
too.
right.
If it's the town and the village
Sure.
splitting this and you want equal parts,
Right.
then it's not the village with
Yep.
the town in the background. It should be equal signatories.
And the commuters too. And this is a good thing for any Main Street businesses, so I don't know why there would be an issue with including the town, so
Right, okay, fantastic.
I can't imagine there could be an
Just
issue.
out of curiosity, where is the benefit in having the Scarborough train station also?
No,
Just for
Dana,
parking?
Dana said that was kind of her envisionment.
okay.
If it was her, if it was her Venn diagram of a vision.
What do you mean, the benefit?
But I think when we have the village coming to us, asking us now, if the village wants to go to Briarcliff and ask them for some money too, I think
Go down that
would
corridor,
be
yeah,
something-
there's that,
I think
but-
that Dana's saying it sounds like a great idea, and it does in general, but you have to have everybody on board. So right now, the village is coming to the town, and we're just saying, if you're gonna come to us and ask us for some money, then we wanna be part of this process.
I'm just
Well, that's a
trying to
good question.
envision the
It's a good
most
question, though. If,
They
so,
sh-
reasonable
maybe they should
loop.
go to the Briar
no, what I was gonna say is, what is
And
a good,
anybody on public transportation could conceivably, since Ossining is the express stop, you can conceivably get from Scarborough to Ossining pretty easily because you're already on the train conceivably. And it stops at Ossining more. So if we were trying to give more dots to outside areas to also go over to Scarborough, I'm just wondering if that's
But
a
Kemmy's
necessity.
Cove is over there,
I
right?
think
That's
you're over,
true.
I mean,
I
I
don't-
think
I'm just-
that,
have
I
all
think
kinds of
we
people
can
live
work
over there.
those,
All right,
those
I'm
things
just
out,
wondering.
and if people wanna use it, there's no downside
To more
of
stops.
expanding it, because the more you expand it, the more you
people
have
can- yeah,
people
absolutely.
going to different places, whether it's commuting, whether it's eating, whether it's
yeah. I mean, the
shopping,
only-
so
the
there's
only
no
downside is the
downside.
logistics of actually making the jitney
Right.
work and the cost to run it.
And not
So
3 hours
those are-
in the
That's
one loop.
why we're looking for planning dollars at this point, which is to study how would you make it work?
Right.
Okay.
And how would it, how would you make it cost effective, and affordable, and all of the things that it would need to be? Where would you get the money? I mean, one of the other pieces of this that could be legitimate is to ask some of the developers who might have interest in reducing the number of parking spaces they have to provide, to provide funds towards, an urban circulator, because then they could, offset the need for as many cars at their development, for example. So those are.
Or their own jitneys, so.
Or the need for their own jitneys, exactly. And they wouldn't have to necessarily operate their own if they were.
I vote to change the name from urban circulators, like, what is
I know, I thought it was like an HVAC system or something, I had no idea what you, like,
I say
Okay.
trolley, I mean,
Probably.
trolley like, I,
an urban circulator,
Last-
that is
last but not
jargon.
Okay, last but not least, we're talking about a tax payment plan for 5 Stanley Avenue. The board periodically gets requests for tax payment plans from property owners who have faced a hardship. Our new receiver of taxes, Holly Perlowitz, has met with the property owners of 5 Stanley Avenue and will be asking the town board to approve this payment plan at next week's meeting. Each board member has received Holly's memo, and I hope that we will be able to come to consensus for next week, unless there's any other issues.
I'm always for payment plans for people.
Fantastic. So, oh yes, there is a
I love Maddie.
call. Thank you for
Canadian
reminding me.
form.
Sorry. Yes, we received a letter from the Coast Guard via, I guess, through City of Yonkers.
didn't Sina Cousin send it to us, am I wrong? I thought Jerry sent it to us.
HHRT.
Oh, right, okay.
On behalf of the Hudson River Waterfront Alliance, we submit the request to participate in the Hudson River Ports and Waterways Safety Assessment. So they've basically reached out to all municipalities along the Hudson and anybody else who's interested to ask if any of us would like to be a part, and I believe we would like to be a part of this alliance. So we're going to request that I think we have to submit a name, and Councilwoman Feldman has offered to be the representative for the town.
I feel I can speak intelligently
is-
about river issues.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you just tell me what it's for? Sounds great. What
It's
is-
the whole anchorages issue.
right, which has been put
How a
to bed
barge
for now.
anchorage would impact our municipality, both our waterfront development, our access,
and
our
vistas,
recreation, the roof,
recreation,
all the different things that
economic
a anchorage would impact our
Okay,
area with.
I get that. So who's this alliance?
It's the Hudson River Ports and Waterways Safety Alliance, which is this organization of 33 Hudson Valley municipalities and counties that are united in promoting maritime safety, protection of the Hudson River, sustainable waterfronts, and coastal zone management.
And we joined that when the barge first came up, it was that Yonkers group, and then it became bigger.
Right. Alliance provided extensive technical and legal comments on the potential establishment of 43 new anchorages in the Hudson River as set forth in the 2016 advanced notice of proposed rulemaking, which the Coast Guard then decided that they were not going to move forward with because they wanted to do much further study because
The
10,000
legislation said that they were
plus.
gonna pass a law.
Right, so now they're,
That's why.
Good.
right,
That's why they said they weren't going to do it right now and needed to study it because Albany was just about to lower a boom, so.
right. So anyway, I just want to mention that we're going to submit a request to participate in that. Okay?
Yeah.
So
Anyway, yes, I am willing to be.
we're going to go out of our work session, and I'd like a motion to enter into executive session for advice of counsel and personnel.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? I mean, opposed? Proposed? It's not even late. I don't have an excuse. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I want to remind everyone about St. Augustine's Festival starting tonight. So if we end early enough, we can all get out there. And tomorrow night is the fireworks show. This is always a special event to connect with friends and neighbors over delicious food, great music. I hope to see you there, and the festival goes until Sunday. Aside from that, we will see everybody next Tuesday, July 25th at the courthouse for our regular meeting. But until then, I hope you'll enjoy the a little too warm weather, especially in this room right now, and the longer days coming up. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a great night.